of Bush in Crawford, Texas, in response to losing her oldest son, Casey, who was killed in Iraq on April 4th, 2004. And since then, Cindy Sheehan has traveled the world working with fellow peace activists, demanding peace and working to help create a world that's peaceful and more economically secure and equal. Cindy is currently the Peace and Freedom Party's candidate for governor of California.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, panelists. It's quite an honor to be invited to participate today. And I'd like to also thank Alliance for Global Justice. They've been my fiscal sponsor for a few years now. And what that means is that people who donate to my organizations can do it and get a tax credit, I guess, or whatever. And that's interesting to me because I'm also a war tax resistor. So it kind of puts me a little, I don't judge people who do pay their taxes, and if they want to donate to me to, help alleviate some of that pressure and get a credit, then, I think that that is really good. And it's wonderful what AFGJ does to allow people in the movement to do things like that. I had to drop them for a while when the IRS was actively persecuting me because I didn't want them to because they were started to ask questions about that. And so they're just very, you all know Chuck and you all know AFGJ and how brilliant and courageous they are in helping these movements. And there's Robert Moses, who works in the Washington, D.C. office and sends me my checks. He's a very important person in the organization. I also want to recognize Jerry Condon from Veterans for Peace. You're on the national board, right? And Veterans for Peace is also a very, very, very important organization in the struggle. So we work with them a lot, of course. So, and Sarah and her organization are important glue that holds a lot of this stuff together. I want to say I'm sorry that Jose Matus wasn't here because we know that the original peoples of this area, this continent, were the first ones that were subject to European imperialism that in this country eventually became the United States. And of course, what's happening over in Israel and Gaza is being modeled off of the concentration camps we put our indigenous people in, which most people call reservations. But, so it was an important, training ground, proving ground for empire as we went from one coast to the other coast, exterminating the original people. And what we see now, I believe, with my heart and my mind, is we see an empire in collapse. And I want to say yay. To most of us here, it cannot collapse fast enough to save the planet, right? And I agree with Sarah that I was very energized to see a lot of people out on the streets to mobilize against Syria. But it still was, let's face it wasn't that many people. It wasn't the people we saw when Bush was president. I can guarantee you, if Romney were president, we would have thousands and thousands of people out on the street. We never, ever would have allowed Libya to happen either. We wouldn't have allowed the drone program to expand 500 times. We wouldn't have allowed AFRICOM to expand under well, they might have done it anyway, because, you know, we did have millions of people out in the streets against Iraq. But it's our duty to be that vocal and present and apparent opposition. Not to say, well, a Democrat's in office, so I don't want to embarrass him. You know, I don't want to appear racist when I oppose his racist policies. Now, of course, it's not the policies of Obama. It's the policies of empire, right? And so I propose we lose the anti-war part of our movement, and we say we're an anti-empire movement. We're a pro-humanity movement. That, like you were saying, tear down the wars, these borders to us are irrelevant. That all the billions of people on this planet, if we here in the richest, used to be most powerful country in the world, cared about all of the billions of the people, there would be peace and economic equality and environmental sustainability, right? And so I saw more people going out against Syria. I was very energized about that. But I believe it's the collapse of the empire that have caused Putin and Russia and China and South America to be more powerful. I just saw a Forbes ranking of the most powerful people on the planet. And guess who wasn't number one? Barack Obama. And guess who was? Vladimir Putin. Now, does that say something? Does that give an indication that we are an empire in decline? And I think that historically, it was the indigenous people who were our first targets of empire, but second was Latin America, South America, and the Caribbean. Well, Canada, we always tried to get Canada. That's what a lot of the wars were about. And now they're just America Junior anyway, so I guess we succeeded in that. But we have seen, like Maria Luisa said, many coup attempts in this century. But we saw one that was successful for only 2 days. And then Hugo Chavez was put back into power by the people. And I think that was the beginning of the end of the U.S. stranglehold in Latin America. And of course, School of America's Watch we have to give them a lot of credit for paving the way for Hugo Chavez to take that first step. And now there was a recent OAS meeting in Cartagena you might have heard about. You heard about it because the Secret Service agents were having sex with prostitutes and not paying them. But what we should have heard was that every single leader that was there from every country in Latin America and the Caribbean, including Colombia, said, if Cuba is not included in the next one, we're not coming. And that's Latin America, the colonized. First it was the Europeans, then it was the U.S. in the 1820s. I think it was 1823, but the 1820s is close enough. When the Monroe Doctrine said, we can go down there. We can do whatever we want in Latin America, basically. And Latin America is feeling strong enough to reject that. And that shows me an empire in collapse. With the rise of GI resistance, of course, we're told now that, and I hear this all the time, your son volunteered. He didn't have to join the military. Well, he felt that that was, and we didn't agree with him at the time because we felt we could do something. He felt that was the only way he could get an education, right? And so many of our young people are facing that, you know, especially in neighborhoods of color, poorer neighborhoods. I thought this is another scandal of empire. I thought for my whole life that just because I was white, I was middle class. And, you know, of course, when I started to think about it more and study it and become an organic Marxist through doing class analysis that I thought I invented, and then I read Marx and thought, hey, that Marx guy's pretty smart. I was never in the freaking middle class. Middle class people don't get evicted, they don't get their homes taken from them, they don't get their electricity turned off. We were in the poor, you know, working class. And that's what we all are. We all are workers. And workers of the world, we have to struggle together to hasten the collapse of the empire. All of our actions that we do should be helping to push that behemoth, that monster off the cliff. Yeah. Right? Yay! So, everybody spoke eloquently. I'm glad Sarah brought up Syria. This panel, I believe, should have had something on the Middle East. Because, of course, it has been our imperial, Middle East and Africa has been our imperial project since Bush came into office. I mean, it didn't just start then, of course, but it's been very, very evident. Boots, you know, Bob said that the peace movement goes away when the boots on the ground go away. We have to recognize there's always boots on the ground somewhere. Like Michael said, 1,000 bases around the world. Not only do we need peace, economic equality, but the environment has to be a priority to us. And we can tie this into economic conversion and anti-imperialism, because like Michael said, the U.S. military is the biggest polluter in the world and the biggest user of fossil fuels. Why don't we close those 1,000 bases around the world and put the people in the communities to work cleaning up those Superfund sites, funded by the United States, of course, because we're the ones that broke it, and do a conversion of those bases to things that make sense for the communities that they're in. I've been to Okinawa. That's a brave struggle against U.S. militarism there and anti-empire. And so what I was going to say about the GI resistance is we have to work on these issues so our young people don't feel like they have to join the military. You know, education is a right, not a privilege. Our young people should be able to go to school for free like all the other countries in the world. Not all of them, but many of the countries in the world. Jobs, and if people don't want to go to school, not everybody wants to go to school. We should have jobs programs and jobs training. And I'm not talking about, you know, ones that funnel them into capitalism. I'm talking about jobs that are community-based to help the community, to build our infrastructure. I just rode my bike across the country. I'm very lucky to be alive, you know, because, you know, all of the potholes, all of the terrible road conditions, especially in Chicago. I used to joke, man, they have Rahm Emanuel-sized potholes in Chicago. And if it rains, he'll drown. He'll fall in one of his potholes and drown. I don't know if you guys know, but he's about that tall. And so, but what we were seeing around the country, when you bite off this country 50 miles at a time, you get a chance to talk to people. People are frightened. People are afraid of the future for their children and grandchildren. And this is an opportunity for us to go out to every community and say capitalism, militarism, empire are what is causing your problems. And not only can it be solved, but we have a better way. Our way is the clear way. And that's why I'm running for governor. To tell the people in California that there is a better way. And I think all of us here are in the streets. But this is a People's Power Assembly. And there's very few of us here. But we need to go back to our communities with what we've learned to be evangelists. To be evangelists for these issues that we care about, to raise a movement, again, for peace, for economic justice and environmental sustainability, and equality, right? Always equality in our movements must be very open, welcome, and diverse to have any effect. Most of the movements are older white people. I'm pleased to see young people and people of color here. Because, if you have a movement that's just a bunch of older white people, I don't see how it can raise energy and be exciting. But I want to say something. When the Occupy movement was apparent, when it was like people were still camped out, I know the Occupy movement is still going, but when they were still camped out and I was going around the country, I said, you are advocating for the right things. You're advocating for universal health care, for jobs, for free education, for housing as a right, not as a privilege. But what you have to start talking about is how much does your community spend on empire? And this ties in with what Michael said. I would go on the National Priorities Project. You put in a city, you put in a county, you put in a state, and it breaks down exactly how much that community sends to Washington, D.C. for empire. They're closing schools, they're closing libraries, they're firing teachers, they're firing librarians. Like I said, the infrastructure is crumbling. Our kids, there's homeless. The homeless population is growing. You say your community spends $3 billion a year on empire. That money could be used here. And that's what gets people excited. It gets people excited that there might be a healthy future for their families and their communities. Thank you.